I'm Cameron Bonzi. I'm with the Coast of Maine Growing Good podcast. I just had the honor of interviewing Eric and Christopher Feml-Nelson. They're part of Grow For Me Gardening on Instagram and YouTube. That is their channel. Bought a house in 2018 in the capital area of New York City, up around Albany. They have done an amazing job. You are going to love what they have to say. Check out their Instagram, check out their YouTube channel. You're going to see some amazing shots. You're going to get some great information, and you're going to really come out of this feeling like you want to start your own magnificent garden. So you also spent hours on YouTube learning how to garden, because I noticed that you talk about that.
Yeah.
So, and the two of you come together. How long have you been together?
10 years.
10 years.
10 years. And when you started, you didn't have a love of gardening, right? It doesn't sound like you started with a love of
Not
gardening.
at all. We well, we have a love of pretty things. And so when we built our home and we went outside and we looked at the landscape from the landscape package that the builder had put in, we were like, well, that doesn't look very nice. I mean, there's got to be better options. And that's how the journey kind of started.
Had either of you or both of you owned a home before this one?
No.
Actually, what is very funny is before we bought this home, we almost purchased a lot that was maintenance free. So we would not have done any of the lawn mowing, the gardening. They come and mulch, fertilize, everything. So before this house, neither of us actually expected to do any gardening.
Because I grew up mowing the lawn. Like, I was in the neighborhood lawnmower kid, and I was like, oh, I don't want to do that. Because I spent, my entire, 10 years old to whenever I graduated college doing that every summer.
Sure. Yeah. And I think it's interesting to me in watching what you guys do on YouTube, both on Instagram, and it's all great. You get a lot of likes and the content is really good. But again, it's that chemistry and that love of what you do. That's really the piece that comes across. And for you guys to learn as much as you have, you're experts now in really a few short years. So you go outside, you buy this house. Who was the first one? Did you both say we need to change this? Who took the lead?
Probably me.
Yeah, he really didn't like it. And it also was in March, so we had no grass. We just had a white spruce way too close to the foundation. And we knew something was wrong about that tree. And Eric went to the garden center. We're very lucky in the Capital District. We have a couple really killer garden centers. So Eric went down there, showed them a picture, and they said, get that tree away from your house. I think we ended up with a bridal wreath spirea, which is still up the hill. And what else did
there
you
were
buy?
3. Oh, what did I buy?
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you what was in it to begin with. There were 3 sea spray junipers, which are fine, and they're still in our landscape in the back. There were about 9 super classic spireas, like the green ones with the bright neon pink flowers, and those are still in the back. They're a hedge back there. Some daylilies, which I'm like, daylilies. That's my feeling about daylilies. Sorry to anybody listening, but the giant Norway spruce.
Yeah. So we pulled the spruces out. They went up the hill, which we did not realize that they were going to be 200 or 300 pounds.
That's how inexperienced we were. We're like, we'll just move the spruces, the bald and burlap spruces. Like, it'll just be this super easy, quick transplant. And we had no idea.
But they're up there and they're still alive. And to be honest, especially the white spruce, it would be in our guest room right now. It would have been. Yeah. So we learned quick about those things. And then the plant that really started us gardening is a plant that we have failed at twice. It is oh my gosh, the pearl, the beauty berry.
Oh, the Pearl Glam beauty berry.
Pearl Glam beauty berry. Eric found one and he wanted it, and we ended up going on YouTube, and Laura from Garden Answer had just planted
Yeah,
them.
she's great. Yeah.
So we learned, excuse me, we learned quite a lot about that plant, and ours died, hers also died. We tried again at some point, but that kind of started the journey. That was us on YouTube. And from there, there's some of the OGs that we still watch today. Some of them we've gotten to meet. And it's been awesome getting to be part of that community.
Yeah, the online community and the people that have passion, like we have a lot of, obviously we work with you folks as ambassadors, and we have about 20 ambassadors, and they all have their own style. They all have what they love. I love the way that they all present themselves and their personalities and their love of gardening, which whatever that is. And then the both of you, you highlight a lot of roses and hydrangeas. I mean, a lot.
A lot.
It's a problem, yeah.
We just did a count.
I was going to say, I think, have you guys thought about getting therapy for this? Because there seems to be, there seems to be an issue.
We could start a GoFundMe, and then we could also start a support group, but not tell them about each other. So we could kind of benefit from the best of both worlds. But
yeah, we're up to 170
Wow.
hydrangeas and about 60 roses.
Wow.
85 roses, like, because I forgot to add the new ones.
But the hydrangea journey started when, when you move into a new lot, there's absolutely no privacy. And so the first thing we wanted to do on our west side in the backyard was just put in a hedge. And it started with, well, what grows big? What can handle full sun? What are our options? And oh, look at this. And it blooms really pretty. And it was the limelight hydrangea. And so we went around from garden center to garden center and collected, 2 or 3 here, 2 or 3 there. And we ended up putting 15 in a hedge. It's little 2 gallons. And, I remember like, that's how we learned about spacing and really like, reading the tags and figuring out how things should be spaced and doing our research online about how to space things. And that was our first big endeavor. And it was the limelight hydrangea hedge. And now it's kind of iconic in our garden. We get a lot of notoriety for it. That's kind of how Proven Winners
Sure.
got their attention, because that was, that was their big hydrangea.
Sure.
It just started this journey of, wow, there's all these types of hydrangeas. And you know how you just get interested in something and it kind of takes you on its own journey. And now we have all kinds of hydrangeas. We don't have a climbing hydrangea. That's the only one we don't have, because we don't really have a structure to grow it on.
Yeah, we don't really have a spot for it, but if we did, we would have one.
Yeah. Well, we've experimented with all kinds, and we have flopped. I mean, we have killed many hydrangeas and learned about the water and our soil and what can handle sun and what can't handle sun. And it's been an interesting.
You do some nice little basic instructions on your Instagram and a lot in your YouTube too. I do. You just recently posted something in the morning. I felt like I should go get a cup of coffee, and just because it was I was actually watching it tonight, and I was like, oh, I want a cup of coffee. I just want to listen to them and I bet people do that. I bet people look at your stuff and go, I'm there. Wow. That's
Eric's morning walks when he goes out just to check on things. People love the morning walk. He's just being honest, because sometimes there's going to be a Japanese beetle and sometimes something needs water. But it's just about taking it all in. It's beautiful, enjoying the garden. That's something midway through this journey, we got kind of stressed out sometimes about making sure it looked perfect all the time.
Yeah.
And now it's a lot more of, well, we just had a heat wave. Things are a little tired, but look at how beautiful everything still is, even in its tired state. So we're learning to kind of roll with the gardening while, maintaining it.
Well, I mean, you both talked about aesthetics and beauty, and you want your place right. I mean, clearly, when you look around, everything is in its place. And that's the beautiful thing about gardening, is that it's not going to always be in its place, right? You can do a lot, you can be there, you can't control the weather, you can control a lot about that climate, but then you get to see things, potentially be a disaster and then come back. It's that renewal, and I just think that that's the piece of the people that I know, that they become so entranced with gardening, and it does so much for their mental health too. I think that's a huge part of it. And I think when you had your failures, you're taking 15 hydrangeas. That's a big, most people would take one or two. And go, let's start here. Let's just plan a couple and make sure we're okay. But you take on this project, and you learn it. You're fearless in a certain way. Those failures, how does that failure, impact? Do you start pointing fingers at each other, or does it,
I mean, it depends on what it is. I'm probably more guilty of finger pointing than he is. I was the middle child growing up. Okay.
Yeah, no. I think there are times where I think I'm a little more big picture, where he's a little bit more detail. And so if sometimes we'd say we're going for a little walk around the garden in the evening, I'll be saying, wouldn't it be great if we limbed this tree up and we did all this planting underneath and we extended the bed and put a pond in? And he's like, there's weeds, so like, but we're doing a really good job this year of finding the middle between my dreaming and his more focus.
Trying to live in the present.
Yes,
that's what I'm trying.
That's what it is.
Live in the moment.
Hold on to the past. Okay.
Exactly.
Don't hold on to the past. It's always about the present and the future. So it seems to me, well, it definitely is. I mean, you guys went into this, you had each other. People so many young people have gotten into garden, older people, it doesn't matter, young, old. What is it? Obviously you love it. What is some of the basic things and simple things that you would tell somebody starting a smaller garden?
I would say, when you're looking at your space, to not look at the entire space, to break it down into smaller vignettes and little moments in your garden. And so when I walk around the corner, this is what I see. So when I look at this spot in the garden, I'm going to just paint that picture in my mind and have my rules, whatever rules you want to create for your own garden. So kind of in our garden, we're like, we want purplish red foliage, and we want chartreuse foliage, and we want blue foliage, and we want green foliage. And so every time there's a vignette in the garden, we want that mix of color, and we want a mix of texture. So we kind of have our own design rules that we follow, but everyone should have their own rules for their own garden.
Sure.
But I think making moments in your garden is a lot easier than making a garden.
Yeah.
Because once those moments are all stacked next to each other,
you get a story. Yeah, you got a garden story, which you obviously have.
Yeah.
And do you draw it out? Do you do any type of design? You just say, we want to do this, and then you're going to local garden centers and saying, hey, here's our idea. Do you bring some images of your garden? Do you say, look, we're doing this? You just kind of go?
We just go. Like in the beginning, I love creating new garden beds. I like the edging process. You give me a half moon edger and I'm just gonna go.
That's awesome.
And I don't know why, but
neither do I.
I love creating the new shapes. So, every time I go out to clean up in the garden, I'm edging and I'm like, well, if I just brought this out a couple inches, or let me just refine this curve a little bit. So there's always little moments that are developing. That's part of the way the garden's gotten as big as it is.
Yeah, and I think if you're working in little moments and little sections, as long as the same rules apply to every little piece of the puzzles come together. But is it the chicken or the egg? We don't know. Like, we'll be at a garden center and we'll be like, we need that plant, and we will find a spot. And we might make a whole bed based around that plant.
That's happened.
That's pretty interesting. Yeah.
Or it'll be we've made this bed and we're like, oh, we're missing something purple. We need to find something purple. What could be purple? And we rack our brains, or we sit in the space, or
And then, we need the purple. Okay, this is a full sun spot. This is pretty dry here. And then you can kind of go into your, typical gardening rules about, how it's going to thrive in the space. So sometimes it's pick what we need and apply the rules. But other times it's we're at the garden center and we see a Shiloh splash river birch. And I forget, we ripped out 3 or 4 shrubs and completely reshaped a bed. And now it's one of our favorite things in the garden. And it's just a matter of we found that tree. And everyone should have a Shiloh splash river birch.
And then I was thinking of, you've got to have great relationships with some of these local garden centers and the people that work there, right? I mean, they've got to see you coming back, and then you become friends. They probably
absolutely.
know exactly what you bought in the past, right?
Some of them do. Like one of our local garden centers, someone who worked there who's since retired, he was the one who taught us how to prune panicle hydrangeas. And he took us outside with a pair of pruners and he showed us exactly how he does it. And I love the way our panicle hydrangeas are shaped because we follow how he does it. And he has his Instagram, and I'll share him on Instagram. And he's the one who recruited us to be part of the open days for the Garden Conservancy.
Oh,
And so
that's
we really
wonderful.
have
Yeah.
made friends with the garden community in our area.
Yeah, and obviously you have friends probably around the country too. And I mean, that's the piece, is sharing that knowledge. You also talk about, you mentioned mulching, and then you mentioned here about, using compost as mulch. And a lot of people don't talk about that, and they don't think about it. They just will sometimes just go get a cheap mulch at a big box store, not think about too much about what it is and what is in it. Your experience with putting compost down, talk about how that changed your soil and how it impacts what you do.
In such a short amount of time, the switch to compost has completely changed the soil structure, especially up front, which the foundation bed is the oldest part of our garden because it originally just had black mulch dumped on it. And it probably had that for 3 years.
Yep.
It did nothing. Like when you would plant, you would have black mulch that had disintegrated.
Maybe not 3 years, because I think 2020 is when we switched. We moved in 2018.
Oh, it has been longer than that.
Yeah, and I think
But-
we should let them know that our soil is like sandy fill.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I described it recently as the color of cheap Easter chocolate
Yeah.
at the drugstore, like just that crumbly orangey brown. So the places that we would dig into that where there was black mulch applied above it, it didn't change at all. But in just a year or 2 after using compost as mulch, it immediately started to change the color of that soil. So as we're expanding beds, there'll be areas where we've just removed the sod and the soil is completely different than 3 feet away in an existing bed. The compost does such an amazing job of changing that soil structure in a very, very short order.
Yeah,
really
it is. Go ahead, Eric.
Oh, it's an easy transition, because if you're using bark mulch, all you have to do to switch to compost as mulch is dump it on top of the bark mulch. And it's that easy. You don't have to pull out your bark mulch. You don't have to do anything. You just put the compost on top. Are you going to get weeds? Yeah, probably. But plant thickly, and then the weeds won't grow, or they'll blend in with the rest of your flowers, because that's what ours do.
And honestly, we have not had more weeds using compost than with bark mulch. The biggest
I think. Yeah, go ahead.
We really don't see that big of a difference. And we've had it sent or we have it delivered in bulk from a landscape supply company. They charge the same amount for the compost as they do for their bark mulch. So it's not like we're somehow spending a fortune on compost. It's the same price.
I think that's also a real key, is that what it's interesting. I get calls all the time in regard to this, and people are always thinking that we're going to be able to deliver bulk mulch, and we can't. We do bag soils, and we do them in 2 locations, but we don't. To do bulk mulch, you can really got to do it locally. I mean, bulk compost. And, I'm always looking for local composters. And I always tell people, listen, I see this online, check with your local garden center, right? They're going to know the people that they trust. And that's the thing. Do you trust the person that you're buying it from? And if something has been composted properly, you want to go local. You want to get that local compost. And then if you're using somebody like Coast of Maine, do a little top dressing in your garden, but you can get that local bulk compost that's going to take care of most things. So that's absolutely the best way to do it. Did you just happen to be looking through online, or get her to find the local landscaper? Did you just happen to connect with them, or?
As far as the source for the compost
Yeah,
goes,
yeah.
I think we just Googled.
We Googled,
Yep.
and we're very lucky. There's one about 4 miles away, so the shipping cost was very minimal.
Yeah.
Or delivery
Yeah.
cost,
Yeah.
That's it.
And I remember I asked our now friend who worked at the garden center, have you ever had compost from this place? And he said, oh yeah, it's nice. And it's a manure-based compost, and that's
Yep.
the one that we use. And a lot of people ask us, or especially like this week and last week on Instagram, I've been getting a lot of questions like, what do you fertilize with? Do you miracle grow your garden? And we don't really fertilize anything other than the roses. The roses get a little, organic, whatever, fish fertilizer or something, but improving the health of your soil just improves the health of your plants tremendously. And investing in that natural improvement of your soil is really going to help the plants overall.
Finally, people are starting to learn that. It's an amazing thing. I got into this business, well, over 20 years ago, but I started work for Coast of Maine about 17 years ago. And I was always a little intimidated when I first started, but I found that I knew a lot more about soil than even garden center owners knew. That back then there was a lot of fertilizing and not thinking about the biology beneath that plant of what's happening below your feet, that subway, that energy, that microbiology. And that is putting that organic matter down. You don't, in most cases, depending on what you're growing, you need very little, if any, what people think of as fertilizer, or even a concentrated organic fertilizer. You keep doing that every year, it's going to take care of itself. And that's the other reason why, like you said, when you put compost on top of mulch, plant thicker, the weeds aren't going to have an opportunity. The soil and what you plant is going to want to take over because it's healthy soil. So it's a natural selection. It's a really cool thing. I was thinking about, what do you do in your off time? Because your off time seems to be in the garden. And do you have anxiety when you go to travel and worry about your plants? Do you have people come over and take care of them?
Well, I would say that the garden right now, it obviously every year it gets bigger, and we are going to be away for about 6 days. So we've been trying to figure out the rest of the garden, in the ground is fine because we have that on irrigation on timers, and I can get it from my phone, but the containers on the terrace. So I was trying to think of a way to run a drip line just temporarily over all the containers, but I think we're probably just going to rely on some friends and family.
I mean, my dad lives down the street, so I asked him if he would do it. He said yes, very happily would do it. But we honestly, over the years, our travel has started to change to being in the winter. And, now especially in upstate New York, it's great to get away in the winter time. And we don't often go away for too long during the growing season. One, because we don't want to leave the garden, but also we love the garden, and we've created this, escape in our own backyard. So we can go there after work and we can spend time there on the weekend. And we're finally at this place this season now where we're like, okay, we have a couple weekends to just rest and relax in the garden now
Right.
because we're all caught up before everything
Maintenance
needs to
mode.
be. Yeah, maintenance mode.
Well, that's it. So I'm assuming that you have, I mean, your space is magnificent. So I'm assuming, hey, do you have parties? Do you have garden parties? Do you, I mean, there's got to be that place, its space is just made for it, right?
We do, and it was kind of designed that way to just have a lot of seating, a lot of opportunity to walk around and enjoy stuff. I mean, when kids come over, they are like zooming around like they are in a fairy tale because it's so exciting to them, and they're looking for the garden fairies, and they're just, it
Oh, that's awesome.
absolutely transforms their energy level into like
Oh, yeah.
running, just want to run and explore. And it's interesting. I have nieces that live in New York City that are very young, and so when they come and visit, they're just wowed by the roses and these
Of
things
course
that
they
they
are. Yeah.
created. So
Yeah. Just like you guys are. I mean, that's the amazing thing. So I'm gonna kind of wrap this up a little bit because we've been on here for half. I want to respect your time too, and this has been wonderful, by the way. But what what is you get a lot of questions. You were going over questions the other day that you got online answering questions, but what is, two or three of your most common questions that people ask you? Because you got a unique space out back. I didn't know if it's just basic gardening questions or is there something different about what you might get for a question?
Well, I think the number one question we've gotten this entire year is, what is that plant over on the fence? The Kinsley's Ghost honeysuckle. That's probably the number one question Eric has been asked is, what is that? It's such a beautiful,
Cool.
unique vine. So that is one.
a lot of it on Instagram is asking for identification of plants, asking for identification of materials, like what type of stone is that? What is so? It's a lot of that. There are a lot of plant care questions. How do I take care of this? But I will say one of the number one questions is, what kind of compost do you, or what kind of mulch do you use? They want a name brand and they want to know what it is. And I always say, we don't use mulch. We use manure-based compost delivered in bulk from a local garden center.
Yep.
And then the follow-up question is always, isn't it filled with weeds?
Ah,
And so there's that hesitation. It's a very different concept to just mulch your garden with compost. I would say that's the number one question I get besides
no,
identifying.
I get that's great, and that we talked about it before. People are afraid of weeds. There's going to be, you're outdoors. There's going to be weeds. Sometimes there's going to be weed seed that comes in. It's work to do a garden and get down on your knees and do a little pulling.
Is
Are you
just
guys,
gardening.
are you in better shape now than you were in 2018, by the way? I mean, it seems like you got to be out there all the time.
A little bit. A little.
Yeah, in a different way.
And there,
So thank you both for being, this has been wonderful. I knew this would be a good conversation, but I want to thank you both for being here. I would encourage folks to, check out Grow For Me Gardening on Instagram, on YouTube. It's worth the time. You're going to see a lot of beauty. And thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
All right.